Can I move to public input? And we have here a special guest from Australia. We have Councillor Richard Foster, who is from the Melbourne City Council, led by Rob Doyle, the Lord Mayor. And Richard is going to speak to us on a very special subject. Some of us were present yesterday at the Smoke Free Forum, where we heard him. And he is an outstanding and passionate advocate and expert in how to turn your city smoke-free, and has done outstanding things in a leadership role in Melbourne in a very short space of time. So, Councillor Richard, we would love you to come forward, and you have 5 minutes, and you're here with John Loof, who's the CEO of the Cancer Society. And as I acknowledged yesterday, John, your society is doing stunning work for our people in that very, very difficult space. Councillor Richard, great to have you here. Nice to see you, mate.
Well, thank you, mate. Thank you, Mayor, councillors. I appreciate how precious your time is being a councillor. It's I know the demands. I'll get through this as quickly as I can. This is actually a condensed version of a half-hour presentation that was given yesterday. You'll see the slides that we're going through now give you an idea of how Melbourne's smoke-free areas are working. To build a bit of a picture for you, I announced 2 years ago that we would take steps to become a smoke-free city, and in doing that, we would implement a series of smoke-free areas being rolled out over a period of time. Since then, 7 smoke-free areas have been implemented across the city after a successful 6-month trial in the causeway that you see on the screen now. 80% of patrons and passers-by supported the ban, as you can see. There are some 17 businesses in the causeway. 11 of those are outdoor dining areas, and they are, apart from only one business in the causeway, they are all now supportive of the smoke-free ban and were throughout the trial. They've reported to us that their takings have actually increased. Business is benefiting from having smoke-free areas, and the principal reason for that is because people are spending longer at the businesses when they don't need to avoid the dangerous effects of passive smoke. It's worth remembering that some 88% of Australians are smoke-free themselves. It's very similar to New Zealand's number of 85%. So it does stand to reason that people are in vast numbers seeking out smoke-free areas, and this is where businesses are benefiting. Some of the things that we've taken away from this essentially is that it has been successful largely because of the community engagement that we embarked upon at the outset. Engaging with the community and getting their views up front and involving them in the process has been crucial to the success of having smoke-free areas that work across the city. This has led to a high rate of compliance. We haven't yet had to issue one fine for smoking in a smoke-free area. We do have the ability to do that in Melbourne, but again, it hasn't been required, simply because the community feels as if they do have ownership of the issue, and smokers feel as if they have been involved in this as well, and that's because they have. Smokers do enjoy doing the right thing. Smokers don't tend to want to do the right thing, and they do like complying with things that benefit the community as a whole. That's been the communication strategy, and that is what has worked. We don't use the smoke-free signs with the big red circles and a line through it all that much. We have to, for legislative reasons, have them in place at smoke-free zones, but we use them very passively. We came up with our own branding that we have used to promote smoke-free areas. We call it we call it the Breathe Easy campaign, and that is one of the things that has worked so well in Melbourne. Breathe Easy is something that is now quite iconic, as is the smoke-free areas across the city, and we have extended smoke-free areas to include businesses beyond those that offer outdoor dining. They're now they now include retail areas and open space areas, event areas like the City Square in the middle of our city. So this is something that isn't now unique to outdoor dining in Melbourne, but applies right across the CBD and, of course, into our parks and gardens as well. Mayor and councillors, this is something that I think doesn't require a great deal of guts to do. I don't think you have to be overly brave to seriously consider implementing smoke-free areas across the city, but it does call for leadership and it does call for ambition. And that's something that, that we have taken on in the City of Melbourne, and it's something that we're very proud of. I hope I've been able to condense that into a suitable period of time for you, and I guess, Mayor, there may be an opportunity for questions if that's suitable to you. How's that?
God, no wonder you Australians get the job done. Don't muck around and talk, we just walk the walk.
And Rob says hi.
Excellent, excellent. Good on you, yeah. Okay, now, our questions. Councillor Denise.
Thanks so much for coming in to present. These don't bend, do they? Very much appreciate your time here and your trip across the ditch. We're not what's the word I'm looking for? We're not so easy with our words here. We're very wordy, that's what I'm looking for here. So appreciate your very succinct presentation. Richard, can you just answer for me, you were in Christchurch yesterday, as you referred to earlier when we talked during the break, and as we know from the media coverage, they're looking at all of CBD policy. When you went out to consult, did you go out to consult with options as like an all of CBD, or did you go out on the area by area rollout that you have currently now?
It's a little out of column A and a little out of column B. So we did do research specific to the areas that we were proposing to make smoke-free, but we also asked the question, did people want more smoke-free areas? So I guess it goes to the idea that we didn't say specifically, do you want it right across the CBD? We simply asked if you want more of it. The answer was overwhelmingly yes and yes.
And also, Mr Mayor, I know that you're probably going to refer to it later, but we do have, as a result of the Trading in Public Places bylaw, where this topic was addressed, and as a panel and then later on as a governing body, we decided that we would take another way forward with this, the bringing forward of the smoke-free policy review. I noticed that the policy team just walked in the room. Is it worth them just outlining for us very quickly, one sentence, what we've got in our forward program in regards to this topic?
Okay, very generous here today, because the good councillor was able to do a very, very short presentation, so he's got some latitude around time. Can we have a quick comment on that matter, please? We could either deal with it now or deal with it in the bylaws, so we might as well deal with it now. Michael? You got what Councillor Denise said?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. So the decision was made or we were directed as a result of the Trading and Events in Public Places bylaw to bring forward the scheduled review of the smoke-free policy to be commencing that work in this year. The work plan for that work has been signed off, and we have just over this last month commenced doing that work. The intention is that that work will be, the review will be completed by the middle of next year, and if there is a proposal for a bylaw to be developed, it will be in that reporting in June of next year. We are, through that review process, also continuing to identify areas where smoke-free can actually be introduced through non-regulatory approaches. And there are several examples, including the Otara Town Centre and areas like that, where the smoke-free initiative has actually already been rolled out into those areas. So I think it's fair to say that we are better at making areas smoke-free than what we are at promoting the areas that we've made smoke-free, and there is definitely room for improvement in that particular regard in the way that our policy decisions are actually rolled out and how the community is informed about those. But I think we also need to be proud of the work that we have actually done in this smoke-free area over the last few years, and the work that we've already committed to doing over the next few years that are still to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My question's to Richard. Thank you for your presentation. Yesterday when I heard you speak, we know, we understand the passive smoking, the health implications and so forth, but you touched on an issue which is dear to my heart, and that is around littering and butts. Fire hazards within our parks, just the general nuisance of it. Would you like to comment further on how you've been tackling that?
I think, Councillor, you would be in vigorous agreement with our Lord Mayor, who shares a pet hate of cigarette butts about town. Look, we have noticed, obviously, that in the smoke-free areas there is next to no cigarette butt litter, but we've also undertaken a lot of effort to beautifying those areas both before, during and after the implementation of a smoke-free area. So this is to encourage businesses in those areas to feel proud of the area being smoke-free, but also to promote those areas actively as being smoke-free areas. So we improve the situation with litter generally. We note that the litter of cigarette butts plummets markedly, and we see the areas benefiting from an overall improvement, be it you know, the implementation of planter boxes or better signage, branding, whatever it may be specific to that area that works.
Thank you. The second question I had, if you will indulge me, Your Worship, relates to parks. We have parks and regional parks in Auckland. What has been your experience with the implementation of this policy through your parks network?
Sure, it's something that is still rolling. Not every park is yet smoke-free in the City of Melbourne. Some parks are under different management structures, so we need to take that into account as we move forward. The ones that have been earmarked as smoke-free, especially those that include children's playgrounds, so those are the ones that we've focused on more, has again been overwhelmingly successful. People respond well to positive branding, and people respond well, I think, to being included, actively included in the decision-making process. So again, I'd emphasise the need for strong and genuine community engagement.
Very good. Right, Councillor Chris Darby and then Councillor Kennedy.
Mr Mayor, I was just going to second your move of thanks, and if we could add John Loof as Chief Executive of the Cancer Society as well. And I don't think the PowerPoint worked, so can we maybe receive the presentation, and that way it's also part of the minute. So I'll just wait for your move.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very quickly, you've just heard that we're going to be looking at our policy and it's going to come back to us in June, and then we'll decide whether we need a bylaw, and then we'll go through the bylaw review. How long did it take you?
That's a very good question, Penny. Look, I would congratulate the City of Auckland on any steps that it takes to move towards implementing a smoke-free initiative. It took us, after the trial, it took us about 2 months to introduce and pass a bylaw. That included a number of weeks to assess the evaluation data from the trial, and then a couple of weeks for me to form a motion and move it. So, look, all up, it was about 8 months from woe to go. Having said that, I think it's fair to say that if you're going to do something, you want to do it properly. It's important to have the right steps in place to make a trial to succeed and not to fail. So, look, it's a case sometimes of whatever it takes. If it's going to be done properly, take the time to do it properly.
Share the greetings and welcome Councillor Foster from the great city of Melbourne, and congratulate him and his council for the benefits and amenity and health that you're achieving. Here in Auckland, apart from, as you would be aware, we've made some gains as well. In terms of urban pollution, we do have problems. According to a recent study with diesel emissions, and I know that Melbourne is the biggest light rail system in the world, up there with Istanbul, and that is due to a great Melburnian, Major General Robert Risen, who was the only transport leader in local government across the Western world that stood out and stood up and held on to the tram system, and now you've got an excellent one. I'm coming to the point, we've been talking about coming to visit your great city for some time now, but your visit here reminds us that we should get on and do something about it, because a visit to Melbourne to look at light rail, in particular your tram system, is even more pertinent for us now, because we are starting to advance plans to bring back trams to Auckland. So thank you.
And it has to be said, we do have some of your old trams that we've taken and have purloined permanently. But Melbourne, of course, is a very wise city. They never ripped up their tram lines. Councillor Alf.
No, thank you, Richard. Richard, yesterday you mentioned legislation that the state put in 2001. Did that enable you, as in the council, City of Melbourne, to move the bylaw process quicker? Because you also mentioned that there's some more legislation moving in the next 2 years. So I'll be interested to find out, one, whether that legislation enabled you to move quicker, and the other question, it might be a tricky one, is that even, or if there was no legislation, that process, I'm assuming, still would have happened in the City of Melbourne?
Sure. The enabling legislation for councils to implement bylaws of this type is the Local Government Act that was introduced in the late 90s. In the early 2000s, so I suppose that's a short answer to your question, that's what gives us the lever. In the early 2000s, the state government moved to introduce smoke-free venues, including bars, clubs and restaurants, and later moved to include sporting grounds and that sort of thing. So this was actually following on from the moves in other states. The most recent move by the state government is to ban smoking in outdoor dining areas. They're planning to implement that by 2017, but I hasten to add that Victoria is the last state in Australia to do that.
Thank you.
I think that has been a very good round of questions. Just final comment, Councillor Richard, really appreciated your learnings on the messaging rather than being sort of using a sledgehammer. You were using a carrot to encourage people rather than damn them, and I thought that was very interesting, and particularly how that is working for you. Now, whether that would transmit to our city, time alone would tell, but I think it's certainly worth a try. So I found it very, very educational. It's great for us to have this engagement. Take the point Councillor Mike is making, that it's probably timely for a range of us to take the learnings again from Melbourne. Doing a great job, the world's most livable city. You know how hard that is for me to admit to you?
Well, Mayor, it's been the world's most livable city for 5 years. 5 years.
Yeah, okay.
You've had 5 years.
I think you've spoken enough.
Mayor, can I thank you, your councillors and your community for the fantastic hospitality I've experienced these last couple of days in your great city, and of course we would welcome you and any one of your councillors in your community to Melbourne at any time. It would be a great honour to host you there.
Kia ora. Thank you. Yeah.
Free whenever you are. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Right.